this session is being recorded in two ways. One, there is an audio visual recording that will go on the YouTube channel. The YouTube channel we'll talk about near the end, but it was also included, the link was included on everybody's invitation. So if you missed some of it, or if you know other folks who might be interested in this information, have them go to the YouTube channel. The other way that it's being recorded is when folks answer the poll, which I'm going to ask a poll question in a few minutes. And when people put stuff in the chat window, that comes up in a database, kind of like a spreadsheet that I can pull. The reason that's important is I am going to be asking for your input as we go through some of this. And for those of you who are veterans to this webinar series, you know that I basically write up a report that will contain people's comments. I never associate anyone's names or identification or anything like that with the comments, but sometimes people come up with some really good ideas, and I think it's good that we can all share good ideas as we go along. So I will be sending out that report later. So as I said, if there's any issues that come up, please feel free to raise your hand, put something in the chat box, and I think for now we are just going to get started. I'm also going to play with the webcam a little bit today, so cross your fingers for me. I've never done that before. We'll see how that works. To begin with, welcome. As I said, I am in Alexandria, Virginia. It is a beautiful day here in Alexandria, and sunny, and you may want to know what that means. Sunny and about 73 degrees with relatively low humidity, which is a little unusual for this time of year, but I'll take it. A good opportunity, I think, to test the chat window maybe is if folks could just type in, if you want to, making sure that you can access this chat window and that it's all working for you. If you could just put in the chat box where you're from and what your weather is today. And I'm going to put mine in as I go. It is sunny. Oh, and I almost spelled sunny. And don't worry, we won't care about typos because I just did one. So today in Alexandria it is sunny and 70. If other folks want to share where you're from, we do have a lot of folks today, so I'm interested to see where we're coming from. And so I'm bringing up stuff now. Good, Decatur, Illinois. And specifically, I'm getting some comments. I know that I don't think anyone can see the comments. I don't think there's a way for me to set that up. So let me just talk a little bit. I want to make sure. Okay, looks like we got some New Jersey folks. It's raining in Trenton. I'm sorry, Barb. That's never any fun. Wisconsin, fantastic. Seamus, welcome back. Delaware, yay. In case you don't know, I do have two kids who are both in college in Delaware, going to the University of Delaware. I have another daughter in Horsham, Pennsylvania. So let me figure out. There we go. That works. Oh, that worked too good. Utah. It's going to be hot in Utah? So good. We got a lot of Pennsylvania, a lot of New Jersey. It looks like. Great. Well, welcome everybody. Sounds like a lot of good weather. I'm going all the way from got New Jersey, Pennsylvania. I don't know why it's raining in Trenton. Illinois basically is the same here. Atlanta. Boy, Indianapolis. You guys are my national weather map. It must be a pretty good looking day out there right now. That's all I got to say on that. All right. Well, thank you everybody for chiming in. I don't see any hands up. So that means everybody was able to do it if they wanted to be able to do it. So let's move forward a little bit and see how this works out. So for those of you who don't know me, Dr. William Geary, I am the founder of Global Evaluation Solutions. Up until very recently, about 8 months ago, I was the Deputy Director of Evaluation and Research at CADCA. I have been involved in coalition stuff for about 18 years. During that time, I've also been involved in a variety of evaluation work, including program evaluation for a range of folks, school districts, probation, police, all those folks. I've also done community and organizational evaluation, and I've also done coalition evaluation. I'm also a two-time coalition coordinator. So I'd like to think that I bring a fair amount of certainly experience to the table. I want to talk a little bit about where these webinars came from before we move forward. Um, in my experience in working with coalitions and with other agencies, it seems that there's a lot of good information out there on evaluation, but I also think that in the information age, sometimes it's really hard to figure out A, where to get it, and B, what's good and what's not so good, because there is a ton of information out there. So this webinar series was basically designed with your needs in mind. How can we facilitate conversations about things that you may not be aware of, or at least may not have uh, a working relationship with? How can we improve that? And in addition to these webinars being recorded, the Coalition Evaluation YouTube channel also has training into practice stuff, which is, these are shorter videos that involve exercises mostly for coalitions to engage in improving their evaluation. So I'm hoping that this will create a national-based conversation on what we do. Which is why we have these folks sitting around a table. I do not see this. Originally, I came up with the idea of having the webinar series that would be, I thought, maybe 3 or 4, and then we'd be done. But there's been such an interest growing. You are part of a record-breaking group. There's 47 people on the webinar right now. The first webinar we had 3 months ago, I had 23 people on it, and there were over 100 people that registered for this. I think the last one, the first one again, there was half that. So interest is growing. I'm getting a lot of requests, and so I'm going to ask you folks as we go through this to think about topics that you might be interested in having, either a training into practice video, which is a short video that's written basically for use during a coalition meeting or prior to a coalition meeting, and it's geared towards just general folks in the community. No special skills required for that. Um, or a full-fledged webinar if you have ideas. My plan is to just keep these going because it looks like folks are finding them really useful. The point of all that is I think there's a lot of experience out there. You folks know your communities, you know what your challenges are. You know what has worked for you around evaluation in the past, and my hope is to create a national conversation for all of that. Okay. The other reason that I wanted to start this is I think, I want to bring best practices to your attention. I know that many of us, I know in me in the older days even, were susceptible, I think, to folks who just acted like they knew what they were doing or sort of knew what they were doing. You should be aware that um, if I'm making something up or if it's just my judgment, I always let you know. But all of the information that I provide, the webinars, the training into practice videos, all of that stuff is research-based, and I tell you where that research comes from, so that you can assess it and really empower yourselves to do more with your evaluation. And I think evaluation is such an important piece. So before we begin going into the content, what I would like to do is give a poll to folks so I kind of know who's sitting around the table. So I'm going to let you answer this question as we go through, and you can select all that apply. So which best describes your current evaluation phase? Please check all that apply. Select one or more of the following. So if you're at the beginning, you're just starting from scratch, you really haven't been involved in evaluation, you would check the first box there. If you're content or not content, but currently engaging in evaluation at some level as an organization or as an individual. The second, if you are looking to improve your evaluation, that would be the third box. If you are leading an evaluation, the fourth, and if I know that we have some evaluators on here, so if you are an evaluator, if you could indicate that. And as I said, you should be able to check all that apply. And just because I'm following along as I'm going, I'm going to answer the questions too, and then figure out where I see the answers. So it looks like, and I don't know, since I've never done this before, and I apologize for that, but it doesn't look like it's letting you see what the answers are. So it's keeping that from you. So we have 70% of folks said they want to improve their evaluation. It looks like most folks are currently engaged in evaluation. When I say most, it's half. It's about half. Let's see, 13% said you're a contracted evaluator, which puts that somewhere around 6. So we have about 6 evaluators. It looks like another couple, 6 or 7 people are leading an evaluation. So great. So we have people who full gamut. Very few people are not involved in evaluation. I think that this webinar is going to speak to all of those folks. Okay. So I'm going to close the poll now so that we can keep going. Thank you for your voting on that. Let's talk about what we're going to cover today. We're going to review the series so that the tree makes more sense to you. I mean, it looks good and it's summer and all that stuff, but there is a reason behind it. We're going to talk a little bit about the competency domains. When we talk about the competency domains, we're going to focus on technical practice. And that will mean more to you as we get deeper into the webinar. And of course, I always provide tools for you to either give more thought to what we've talked about or to share with others. And again, there will be a training into practice video on the tool that we will use, and then we will have some final thoughts. So let's start with the webinar series. For those of you who have been involved, this is a little bit redundant. For those of you who have not, this is what you've missed so far. And these 3 webinars, I don't think the next ones necessarily will tie together as closely as these 3 do. But these 3 webinars basically focus on 3 related topics. One is your evaluation functional for you? So the first webinar we had was called Functional Evaluation, and we set out coalition goals, and we said, is your evaluation being used to help you achieve your goals? And there's a whole range. I think there are 8 goals, and of course this was supported by the research around how we can use evaluation. So it's getting us to think a little bit about, are we getting everything that we want to get out of the evaluation? The second webinar a month later was basically providing a foundation or a structure for your evaluation. Are you engaged in the best practices in terms of how your evaluation is set up, right? Is your evaluation plan complete? And to cover that topic, we looked at the Joint Committee for Joint Committee Standards on Educational Evaluation. Was a committee of professional evaluators and researchers who since the 1970s have been meeting, and they developed a set of standards for evaluation. And we talked about what some of those standards are, just very brief overview of what they are, primarily for the reason that most people who are engaged in coalition work may not even know that those standards exist, probably have not had a conversation with your evaluator, your evaluation team around those. And so it's how do you kind of bring that conversation up with them and think about, are there standards that you're already following, or are there standards that you really need to improve on? The last one then of this set, I think, involves the skills or the competencies that are required in order to fulfill those standards, which will then help you get the most out of your evaluation. And to do that, a lot of places have evaluation associations, right? Certainly the United States has one. It's called the American Evaluation Association, of which I am a member. But the American Evaluation Association actually is working on the final steps of their evaluation competencies. They actually don't have a statement out about that yet. They've not developed those yet. I understand they are near the end of development and should be released pretty soon. But in looking at all the research on competencies and skills, I came across the Canadian Evaluation Association, that's CEA. They do have a set of formal guidelines that they put out for evaluation, and it pretty much matches what others have said. I chose the CEA recommendations because they basically covered everything that everybody else in research talked about. I read a ton of research on these things, and we're going to talk specifically about one of those pieces of research as we try to narrow down which skills are most important. So these three go together, and in my brain, as I was putting this together, I wanted to do something that was a little different. So I kind of saw these as what I referred to as kind of the evaluation tree, right? And the first part of the tree is the functional evaluation. That's the fruit of the tree. Are you getting what you need to be getting, right? What is the outcome of your evaluation, right? In order to get that, however, in order to make sure that you're getting good fruit from your evaluation in terms of its use, you have to have some type of structure in place. And I look at that as kind of the trunk and the root system, right, of the tree. That is the method by which nutrients and good stuff actually get to fruit so that we can create something that's useful for us. So that leaves, of course, today, what we're going to be talking about is how are we going to feed that tree? How are we going to be able to support and sustain that structure that gives our evaluation what we need to get out of it, right? So let's talk a little bit about what competencies are and what that means. And I took this of all places, and I apologize for being non-scientific, but I took this from Wikipedia, believe it or not, because I think it really speaks to all of us. It's a set of behaviors enabling the identification, monitoring, and development of desired behaviors, right? So I stole the idea from them, kind of tweaked it a little bit. But if we notice in that polling question, when I asked what stage of evaluation you're in and what role do you play, this definition tells us that what we're going to talk about in terms of competencies and skill sets, it speaks to you no matter what you're doing. So if you're one of the 18% of the folks on the webinar today who said that you're starting from scratch, well, this is identification then for you, right? This is identifying the competencies and the skills that you should be looking for or you should be trying to put together at an organizational level. If you're already doing evaluation, this is a really good way to monitor or assess what your evaluation is doing. Do you have all the skills at the table? Maybe there are skill sets that you didn't realize or didn't give much thought to. So this is a method of trying to improve on what you're doing. And the same would be the development. If you find out that there are skill sets that are missing, how can you get those skill sets? Are there people in your community that are familiar with those skill sets? Is this a conversation that you've had with your evaluator? And certainly one of the things for the handful of evaluators who are on the call today, and thank you for joining me and being on this, it's kind of those areas of development, right? What are the areas of professional development? We can certainly use a list from the CEA that tells us, we can look at that list and go, okay, so there are probably some areas that I need to be working on as an evaluator in order to help those coalitions or help the organizations that I'm doing evaluation for do that better. And if we take all of that together, then what it is we end up with this, what I call the evaluation tree. Let's start talking about the competency domains, though. Let's get right into those. I do want to keep us to an hour today because the weather's too nice, apparently, around the whole country. You should all get out and take a walk. But there are 5 competency domains according to the Canadian Evaluation Association. As I said, this is very similar to what we see just in the general research that we find. And we're going to talk about each one of the domains. Now, you should be aware that each domain has a set of skills and competencies within it. All told, there are 59 competencies that make up evaluation skills. So we're obviously not going to go over 59 skills. What I've done instead is I have included for you the handout called Evaluator Competencies, parentheses CEA PDF, and I think it's the one that's listed second on the handouts. It's number 2. that list is there. I think it's 16 pages long, and it basically is nothing more than just a list and the associated skills that go with that list, including the definitions of all the domains. What we are going to do, though, is we are going to focus on one of those domains, and we'll talk about why that is in a moment. And for those of you who are on my previous webinar, you will appreciate this slide. Yes, it's the kitten. The kitten is back. I love the kitten. But the first domain that we're going to talk about briefly is what they call the reflective practice. All right. This is particularly helpful, I think, for those of us who are evaluators. And this is norms, values, awareness of strengths and weaknesses as an evaluator. If you are not an evaluator, however, or if you are working on an evaluation team, we have to remember that these evaluation skills should be somewhere in the whole team, right? We're talking about reflective practices and all of these domains. We often rely on an evaluator to have most of the 59 skills that are included in this Canadian Evaluation Association list. But if you're not using an evaluator, or if you are, but in a minimal role, these are the types of skills that your community should be able to bring to the table and work together. No single person probably is going to be an expert on all 59 of these things. This is why it's important to be able to assess what your strengths are, not just as an individual, but as a group. What skill sets do we already have at the table as a coalition, right? Reflective also involves ethics. It involves human rights issues. This is particularly true for those of you who are involved in program evaluation, right? And it involves professional development, and that any serious evaluator should be constantly looking for opportunities for professional development. And that's why the American Evaluation Association is so helpful, because they offer a lot of stuff on professional development, and a lot of it is free. Another domain is what is referred to as situational. And situational is, I guess, if we had to house this with something, I would refer to it as kind of the art of thinking on your feet as an evaluator, right? So the definition that I put together is appropriate application and decision making, considering unique interest, issues, and contexts. Every evaluation is different because every program, every community is different. This is particularly true for coalition or organizational evaluation. There is no McDonaldization of coalition evaluation because there are so many variables that change. And this is the place, the situational is the place where a good evaluator is really helpful, because it's the ability to think on your feet, to take lessons learned, take best practices, and apply them to the context, the specific issues that you might be involved in, the specific situations that are coming up for your coalition. Right, so situational is this thinking on your feet. It's really the sharing of your expertise as you move forward, a very close examination of context, and this is also the area that you have to think about how your findings are going to be used, right? What are the implications? This is something that I think that sometimes gets missed in evaluation, and that is, if we release an evaluation report that says A, B, C, D, what are some potential ripples in the community? Are there people that this is going to rub the wrong way? Are there people that are going to celebrate this? I think it's important for evaluators and evaluation teams, before they deliver a message, to think about how that message is going to be delivered. And the situational is where that is very helpful, because hopefully you've had experience in a wide variety of contexts. And so you get that, you know what's going to happen. Management is the next issue, especially for coalition evaluations. Coalition evaluations involve managing quite a few things, right? There's organizational issues. There's logistical issues around data collection at a variety of levels. There's multiple kinds of data from multiple kinds of sources using multiple partners, right? So the logistical aspect of coalition work is important as well. So it's important for a team or an evaluator to be able to handle that. This is where you have the issues like budget, for example, identifying and obtaining resources that are needed. I know that certainly I've worked with or I've seen, not worked with, I've seen evaluators, for example, or evaluation companies that will charge coalitions for software. I think it's really important to think about what you're getting for your money there, right? Because I consider it my role as an evaluator to provide what's needed that the community can't come up with on their own. My thinking is, if I go away, you should be able to do it on your own. So I make a lot of use of free software for folks and train them how to do it, how to use that. I just think that's really important, right? Those that might be a very important resource, and I just don't think that that should be an extra burden to the folks that are being evaluated. That should be something that I should be problem solving with them. So we're going to ID and obtain resources, and we're also going to mitigate issues that come up, right? This is all in the management. You have people who didn't collect the right kind of data, or you have some type of issue where the data didn't come to you in a form that's very usable, right? These are all up to the lead evaluator or the evaluation team to be able to manage all of those issues as you move forward. So management, logistics, really important piece of that. Another important piece to this puzzle is interpersonal skills, right? We do expect evaluators will be communicating with a lot of people in the community, which means you better be people friendly and you better be people oriented. If you have folks on your evaluation subcommittees, for example, who are just not very good with people skills, then maybe assigning someone who is to that subcommittee. I'm sure that evaluators on the line will agree that, if you're not communicating well with partners, it just makes the evaluation much more difficult to do. So we want to be able to have people skills. There are going to be conflicts that come up. We need to have good conflict resolution skills. We need, of course, to be able to collaborate. And that's just not collaborating ourselves as an evaluation team, but it's also creating collaboration among partners so that they can share information with us and with each other as we go through. And of course, negotiation skills are very important here too. Also covered in this is just the basic stuff about, being a good listener, hearing what the people are telling you, as opposed to just trying to use some type of a canned response. This I get a lot, particularly with drug-free communities evaluations, if any of you are on one of those grants, because kind of, the government tells you what you need to be reporting on. So it's important for someone walking into a DFC evaluation to really try to move the coalition beyond that and say, okay, this is what the government wants us to collect, but what do you really want to know? What do you want to collect? And being able to listen to partners to be able to do that. Always maintaining a high level of professionalism. Um, I know that my personal experience is that and I'm sure the others would agree who are on the line, we're paid to be professional. Um, if you act somehow in an unprofessional manner, then whatever it is that you do is going to reflect that. People are going to look differently at it. So it's important to maintain a high level of professionalism and a high level of communication with stakeholders so that you're not missing anything, right? So interpersonal communication is another domain that is very important. The one that we're going to spend some time talking about, however, is what's called the technical practice. And I want to focus on this one because if we look at the other domains, right? We know people on our coalitions who have interpersonal skills. We know people on our coalitions who are probably pretty good at managing projects. We know people who can think on their feet and understand the community context within which decisions are made. And of course, we know folks and we can always get tools to help us reflect on what we do. The thing that, at least my impression, is the thing that most people want to pay an evaluator to do, or the part that we really struggle with in creating a team for evaluation involves these technical skills. These technical skills involve design, right? Research design, data collection, choosing the right data, getting the right data, analyzing the data. What does all this mean when we put it all together? Interpreting data that can sometimes come back in a very confusing way, um, and reporting on data, right? Most of us, when we're thinking about bringing somebody in, think in this domain. This is the domain where folks feel that their skill levels are the most challenged. So I want to talk about what all of them are. There are 16, and we're just going to brush over these kind of quickly. And then I'm going to focus on a few of them, and I'm going to ask for some feedback from all of you, uh, to the idea of how could you demonstrate that you have this skill set, right? Like what would you say or show somebody to demonstrate that? We're not going to do it for all 16, but we will do it for the 5 that I'm going to select. So let's start with the first 4. These are in no particular order. So under technical skills, we of course expect someone who is well versed in theories, models, types, methods, and tools for evaluation. And there are many different evaluation theories out there. There's a ton of tools out there. There's a ton of models, depending on what kind of evaluation you're looking for. And of course, there's a ton of theories that drive evaluation. So having someone who is well versed in these really helps with the other parts of the practices of the other domains. But what we expect is you'll take that understanding so that you will, as a committee or as an individual, specify what the theory of the evaluation is. Now, I want us to just keep in mind that the theory of the evaluation is not the change theory that you're working on, right? The theory of the evaluation is how you're going to be able to demonstrate the value, merit, or worth of whatever it is that you're evaluating. That's different than coming up with a model for community change, for example, right? You're coming up with a model for how you're going to measure that change. So it's important to have some type of background in program theory and to be able to apply it. It's also important to help determine the purpose for the evaluation, and one that also doesn't get a lot of conversation but probably deserves it, and because it always comes up one way or another, is determining program evaluability. That is to say, what kind of evaluation can you actually do based on whatever the model for change is and based on what the resources of the community are, right? So the first 4, we expect some type of basic knowledge about evaluation theories, models, types, tools. We expect the application of a program theory. We expect some help in determining what the purpose of the evaluation is. And then we expect some type of assessment on the evaluability of the evaluation of the project. So some more skills then. Frames evaluation questions, right? The evaluator or the evaluation team should take a lead role in helping to frame evaluation questions. There are rules and guidelines. My next training into practice video is going to be this specific one, framing evaluation questions, because I'm a big believer in preparing up front. There are general rules about this, right? In general, you shouldn't have more than 5, no, certainly no more than 7 evaluation questions that you're trying to answer, because then you're just doing too much. But you will need to prioritize them. You need to frame them, all that. From that, then you will come up with an evaluation design, right? What is it going to look like? And then you're going to come up with some type of evaluation methods. I have qualitative, quantitative, and mixed. We just did a training into practice that talks about the similarities and differences between qualitative and quantitative and why it's important to have mixed data. So it's coming up with what does that mix look like, okay? From that, then, we would expect to be able to identify what the data is that is going to represent that mix. So number 8 would be identifying the data sources. The next 4, we're going to talk about reliability and validity. This is something that you should know a lot about if you're involved in evaluation, because we certainly want to make sure that we're accurate, to what we say. We don't want to draw conclusions that don't lead us anywhere because they weren't formed properly. We also have to collect the data, and certainly part of collecting the data is also storing the data, right? So data collection is not just about pulling the data from whoever has it. It's also about how we're going to store it and what we're going to do with it after we have it. We should be able to speak to the validity of our data. So we should be able to come up with some proof or evidence that the data is valid, and we should also be able to come up with some proof or evidence that the data is reliable. Just as a quick aside, I don't know if folks are clear on what the difference between validity and reliability are, but I can throw one out really fast. Reliability is when you do something, you'll get the same result over and over again. Validity is the idea that you are accurately measuring what you want to measure. So for example, if I am interested in 30-day use of alcohol use for youth in my county, I'm not going to use state level data because that would be an invalid measure, right? I need to gather information from youth in my community for that to be valid. I'm also probably not going to measure 30-day use by asking people if they have ever used it, right? I'm going to ask them about their 30-day use. Those are all measures of validity. Reliability means when I ask them the question isn't confusing so that people will always answer in the same way. They'll always be answering the same question as they go through. And certainly if there are questions about that, we could put together a tip video on validity and reliability. If you want us to, just let us know. The last four then are assessing the trustworthiness of the data, analyzing and interpreting the data, another important art, I think, drawing conclusions and making recommendations about the data, critically important, and then reporting evaluation findings and results, right? So again, this is all, what are we going to do with the information after we have it, right? And is that information that we're pulling together trustworthy? Which means, does it make sense to folks? And will folks look at that data and go, yeah, okay, I believe that, right? So that's part of the trustworthiness issue. Reliability and validity can be a part of that. So let's talk a little bit about, since we have 16 of these bad boys standing in front of us, I know particularly if you're at the beginning or if you've not addressed these kinds of issues before, if you're involved in evaluation, this can be a little daunting. I mean, forget 59, just 16 can be kind of hard to wrap around. So what I wanted to do is, I thought, okay, so these are not all equal to evaluation, right? Some of these skills, even within the technical area, are more important for a good evaluation than other parts, right? So there is research out there on this topic, and the research that I am picking is a 2013 study where professional evaluators were polled. They were asked, what's the most important piece that an evaluator brings to the table in doing evaluation, right? And I used an agreement rate of 93% or higher. So that means that what we're going to talk about now, there was general agreement at a 93% or higher level among professional evaluators that these skill sets are important. And if we look at it that way, there are 5 skill sets out of these 16 that receive a rating of 93% or higher in terms of what's important. And so maybe these 5 are a good place to start if you're not familiar with some of these ideas. And the first one is frames evaluation questions, right? And in the research, that's described as working with the coalition to review all evaluation elements, develop core questions, right? And this is important because it's how you're going to monitor progress. So framing evaluation questions is one of the 5 that received a high level, saying that yes, evaluators or evaluation teams really need to know how to do this. Another thing that they really need to know how to do is evaluation or research design. There needs to be a strong familiarity there. Notice that so far, both of them talk about engaging the coalition and engaging stakeholders. This is a very important piece to evaluation. The days of having an outside third-party evaluator who's not using the folks that they're evaluating as a resource, I think, are quickly fading. The research, certainly on coalition evaluation and many types of organizational evaluation, even program evaluation. I was involved in evaluations have been involved in evaluations for probation, parole departments, and I can tell you that the research is getting clearer and clearer that your evaluation is a lot better if you're including them in the conversation. Part of that conversation is then sharing information about what you know about research design, about evaluation design, and talking to them and getting their input in terms of how you should be able to do that. There are a couple key terms in this definition that I would ask you to pay attention to, right? We want to make sure that it's feasible. We want to make sure that it's efficient. We want to make sure that it's effective, right? So we start with framing evaluation questions, and then we go to develop evaluation designs. And again, I'm hoping that you're thinking about how can we prove that we're doing this, right? Like, how can you prove that you are helping to develop evaluation designs if you're an evaluation team, right? What does that look like to you? The third one then is talking about the methodology. All right, and certainly the design is not the methods. This is where we get into the data triangulation. The data triangulation simply refers to mixed methods. That's the using qualitative and quantitative data together. And of course, problem-solving data collection issues as they come up. Because what you don't want is you don't want to design a methodology, a research methodology or an evaluation methodology that then falls apart because the context of the situation doesn't allow it to happen. You want to be able to make adjustments as you go. So again, 93% rating on defining evaluation methods. Also a 93% rating on analyzing and interpreting the data. Data can be a tricky thing. Determining the degree of, here's some new words, attribution and contribution, right? Attribution means that you're absolutely certain, you're fairly certain that what you did specifically made that difference. Contribution is something that you did contributed to the change, right? And how much do you think it contributed? What kind of an argument can you make that what you did contributed? For those of you who are doing program evaluation or are involved in program evaluation, or if you're working at the coalition level with folks who are doing program evaluation, they are all about attribution primarily, right? Because they have probably a very small set of individuals. They're exposing them to something and then they're measuring the difference. And so they can then make arguments that whatever it is that they exposed those people to, made a difference, if there was a difference to be found there. Contribution is very different. The coalition, there's a lot of things going on in a community. So we're more likely in a coalition evaluation to want to make a reasonable argument that, yeah, what we did made a difference, and here's why we think it made a difference. Part of contribution, by the way, is also talking about what are the other things that may have made a difference besides what you did, right? So that people can decide how much of a difference did you actually make. I mean, there's all kinds of people who are working on all kinds of issues in your community all at the same time. It's constantly moving. So we want to make sure that we expose that and that we frame it so that it makes sense to people. If something happened in your community that may have impacted the outcomes, it's important to let people know that, right? Data synthesis is also another important piece of this. You're going to be collecting a lot of data, folks. So you got to be able to pull it all together and come up with a what does it all mean kind of statement, right? So analyzing and interpreting the data, this is something that I think experience is really helpful for. It's really helpful to be able to do that. And then the last one that gets the 93% or higher is reporting evaluation findings and results. As an evaluation team, as an evaluator, you should be able to do that. Now, please notice that they don't just mean generate a report. right? So I know, for example, I work with DFCs, that DFC Me generates a report that coalitions can use. But that report is not what this speaks to. This speaks to explaining all the reasoning, the methods, the procedures that you are engaged in as an evaluation team. You do that so that outsiders can understand your reasoning, can understand why those conclusions or those recommendations were made, right? It's important to be upfront and honest, and it's important to just expose everything that you're doing to the world as an evaluator so that people can look at what you do and decide for themselves the veracity of that. Does this make sense? The other thing, by the way, that's really helpful for is sustainability. Um, because if, for example, if I'm a paid evaluator and I come in and I explain how I did everything and why I reached the conclusions I drew, those become teaching moments for people on the coalition. They can learn about how an evaluator thinks and about how evaluation actually works. How do you draw a conclusion as an evaluator? What does that look like? So that hopefully my role as an outside consultant can decrease over time and they can take more responsibility for doing that on their own. I would also like to add that that particular type of thing, this idea where you're talking about reasons, methods, procedures, is also a great skill set to be able to bring to the workplace, right? Or to a school setting, to have practice doing that. So I know I've talked a lot, and I know that we're pushing the end, but I'm hoping for those of you who are still with me, if you could just chat into the chat box, pick any one of these 5, right? And just come up with what you might think might be one way. Is there a way that you think you would be able to demonstrate that you do this, right? So, for example, defines evaluation methods. How would you be able to prove that you're using data triangulation, right? If you are talking about analyzing and interpreting data, how would you be able to prove that you are, in fact, considering the ideas of attribution and contribution? And I hope that question is not too much at this point. I understand that it may be, because it was a lot. It was a lot. So how can we demonstrate that we do these things? He said, as he hopefully sent that out into the world. Oops. Which I'm trying to do. I don't know if it worked. Did it work? Okay. Okay, so I have some questions. Right, okay. Some people are like, I'm not sure, but I am getting other stuff. Oh God, Barbara says there's thunder and lightning in Trenton. Okay, so let me address some of these questions as we're going through. Will the slides be available? Yes, we're going to talk about that. The slides will be available. Vivian can take care of that. The next question is, can you give us an example of how a specific model might look at community evaluation differently? And unfortunately, because of time constraints, that's a really technical question, but I am happy to have a conversation with you, Gail, about what your model might look like and what that might look like. Okay, so let's move forward then. Again, in the interest of time, I just want to make sure that we are going to be a little over budget here, but hopefully not too much. So one of the tools, the first handout, is this evaluator competency worksheet. Okay, so there's a couple things I want us to keep in mind. I'm not judging anybody. The word competency is not the word I chose. It's the word that the Canadian Evaluation Association chooses to talk about skill sets, right? So you could change the title to Evaluator Skill Sets Worksheet if you wanted to, or whatever. Competency does not mean that if you don't have it, you're dumb, right? That's not what it means. It means, do you have the abilities to do that or not? And what I did is I listed all 16 of the areas under technical practice. And one of the things that you may want to begin a conversation with your evaluation team or your evaluator with is, okay, let's talk about how well we do all 16, with the understanding that no one is perfect at all 16 of these. There are certainly going to be areas that we need support, and that's really what we're trying to find, right? What are the areas that we're really skilled in, and what are the areas that we might need some support? And when I say we evaluators, I mean even us. Like sometimes I know I am not afraid to go to folks who are paying me to do an evaluation and say, hey, I'm having some real struggles here with this data collection thing under this plan that we came up with. Can you help me address that? Right? Certainly, but this is an opportunity to kind of think more proactively about what those areas may be instead of just trying to put out fires as they come up. Right? So I listed them all, and then it's just a matter of, you notice you'll see low, medium, and high, and it's just thinking about that, right? What is the competency level for each competency? Specifies program theory. Are we really good at that? Or maybe we're not so good at that. So let's admit that so that we know how we need to develop ourselves, or we know what we need to be looking for in the community. Is there someone in the community who might be really good at that we need to kind of tap them on the shoulder and say, hey, can you help us with this? I put in bold the 5 competencies that received the 93% agreement rating in the 2013 study. Right. So if you're thinking about which skill sets should we focus on, I would say those 5 are probably the ones. And then the last column is the reasoning. Why did you give it that kind of a score, right? If you said high, what I expect you'll write in there is you'll write some proof or some evidence that you are good at that competency. If you said low, maybe there are things, maybe you don't have all the resources that you need, or maybe there's someone who used to do it and they just left, right? So it's important to think about that. The last thing that I want you to think about in terms of all of these handouts the handouts that I'm providing is, there's a reason I gave you the Canadian Evaluation Association handout. And that's because of these 16 competencies. So let's say, for example, that I'm you and I'm sitting there listening to this webinar and somebody's babbling on and on about assessing validity of data. Well, maybe I have no idea what that means, right? The Canadian Evaluation Association actually tells you what that means. So for each one of these competencies, the Canadian Evaluation Association describes what are the specific behaviors that indicate a level of competency in that competency area. So let's look at an example of that, right? And I don't know if folks can see that, but it might be better to open up if you have the file for that, you might want to open it up. And let's stick with, and what I did is this slide is just one of the 16 pages. But if we go under, for example, specifies program theory, right? The document tells us exactly what we need to do. It says that you have to understand the parts of program theory, logic models. It says that you have to be able to consult with stakeholders to identify the parts. It says that you have to understand the program and the logic model in context of the theory. What's the theory that drives the logic model? You should be able to draft a logic model that makes sense to people, right? So it specifies what all of those things are. Let me just find one that's not listed here. Assesses validity of data. It says the first one is ascertain whether or not all members of the sampling frame population had an equal chance of being included in the sample. That's a way of assuring validity. So it basically breaks down for you all the skills and behaviors within each set. And obviously this list is really useful. If you're thinking about hiring an evaluator or putting together an evaluation team, you can use this list, this document, to help decide what are the traits and behaviors and skills that people should be bringing to the table. As I said, if you're engaged in evaluation, it kind of helps you assess what are the skills that you're really good at, what are some of the things that you're missing. So let's do a quick review as we go through. And if folks have other questions, feel free. And I'll answer your question in just a second, Kathy. So the place that we started was my kind of crazy evaluation tree, which I wanted to make into a tree. We talked about the competencies. We talked about using this worksheet to start getting a handle on our own competencies and how we're able to do that. Okay, and hopefully that will, those two things working together will be helpful to you. A couple of things, I guess, just in closing that we want to keep in mind before I answer any questions that you have, and there's already a couple up. The next webinar, I don't know if you can even see that or not, is scheduled for the second Wednesday of July. I don't have a topic yet, so please, please, please let me know what kind of a topic you think would be helpful for you and your coalition. And I do intend to keep these going. I also will be sending out an email shortly that will connect you to SurveyMonkey, which I think, yes, SurveyMonkey. We haven't transcended the limits on the free account yet, so it will be SurveyMonkey. Just a satisfaction survey. You will have an opportunity in that survey to tell me about any topics that you think would be interesting to you, and also the YouTube channel, which is really just now getting up and running. Coalition evaluation. If the link is in the materials I sent out before, or if you just go onto YouTube and type coalition evaluation, or if you just go onto Google and type coalition evaluation videos, it's actually like 3 out of the first 4 hits or something. It comes up, at least was the last time I checked it. So it's pretty easy to find. This is a conversation. I hope that you folks found this useful. If there's something that we didn't talk about that we should talk about, please let me know. I want to answer a couple of the questions now. We have an outside evaluator and evaluation committee. Do you recommend going over the worksheet with both? I would say yes, because if you're, in terms of design of the research or the evaluation, your evaluator should be the point of contact for the evaluation subcommittee. They should be the chair of the subcommittee, the evaluation subcommittee. They should be the one running all the meetings. They should be the one handling all the logistics in terms of what is happening. And I say should just in the sense that that's the most efficient way of doing it. If you do it any other way, I think there's a communication breakdown. So absolutely. In fact, I would say that probably, Kathy, what I would do is I would start with the evaluator and say, hey, let's take a look at this worksheet. Tell me what you think about this. Let's take a look at this booklet from the Canadian Evaluation Association, and then talk to them about how they intend to work with the evaluation committee on that. I think that would be a good model, at least in my head, not knowing anything else on what they're doing. And for some reason, it's not. Okay. So yeah, okay. So if there are not any more questions, which I think, oh, there's another one. Okay. Yes, absolutely, Ruth Ann. I will share anything. I give everything away these days, it seems like. Yeah, the free resources I spoke about, absolutely. I will be able to share them. And I will send all that stuff out when I send out the final email. So if there are no other questions, I just have to try something really quickly. Sorry, I'm trying to find where it is. Oh, there it is. For those of you who don't know what I look like, and you're going to see my living room if I do this right. I'm kind of, oh, there I am. Yep, sorry about the headset, but it makes sure that you can hear me and I don't get distracted by other sounds. And I am a Philadelphia Eagles fan, which is right there. So I apologize for that. But thank you all for sitting in and sharing. I'm going to be sending out more information on this and future stuff as we go on. Remember, this is the beginning of a conversation. This is not the end of the conversation. I am not the expert as much as I am the facilitator. It's my job to bring good stuff to you. If you need to contact me, wgeary@globalevaluationsolutions.com, also coalitionevaluation.com, which the website isn't quite up yet, but they already do have a helpline. So if you have any evaluation questions, feel free to give them a shout out at help@coalitionevaluation.com. And as I said, don't forget to check out the YouTube channel. And I'm going to sound like all the other folks on YouTube. You can subscribe, which means you'll get updates. You just need a Google account to subscribe, I think. And once you have that, I think subscription is really easy. Or you can like videos, or you can leave comments on videos as you go through. So again, thank you everybody for joining me today. This is very exciting for me. I'm going to try to get outside and get some of this nice weather. So take a walk, do something, right? We're all about community health. So thank you everybody. Take care. And I'm going to get rid of the camera now, but I'll stay on a little bit in case people have other questions or they want to get those they haven't gotten the handouts yet. So put it on your calendar a month from now. Bye. Bye, everybody. Talk to you later.